Good evening. I'd like to call to order the November 19th, 2019 work session for the Methacton School District Board of Directors. Please rise for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
By way of announcements, the public is hereby advised of the audio and video recording of this meeting for the purposes of rebroadcasting. Please be advised that the board met in executive session prior to this meeting in a classroom of the high school on November 19th, 2019, for the discussion of 2 student matters and a matter of personnel regarding an administrative employee. By way of attendance, we have all 9 board members attending, 8 physically, 1 virtually. Recognition of guests and scheduled speakers. Dr. Zerbe.
Thank you, Madam President. This evening we have a number of guest speakers. We have Mally for the 2018-19 fiscal year audit presentation. Members of the board, you should have an executive summary audit presentation at your placemats.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dale Umbenhauer. I'm the manager on the audit of the school district. I'm going to just go over the audit presentation with you. It'll take just a few minutes. So on page 1, this is the agenda. So these are the 3 things that we're going to go over. Page 2, these are required communications under the auditing standards. So we were required to inform you that we have an unmodified audit opinion on the financial statements, an unmodified opinion on the single audit, and we had no disagreements or material weaknesses with regards to SAS 114 and SAS 115 communications. The next page, this is a sample of the audit testing that we did. We got your trial balance and your general ledger, and we analyzed that. We reviewed the internal control system. We had no material audit adjustments. We did reconciliations and confirmed that the cash and investments were collateralized under Act 72. We vouched material additions to the capital assets and reviewed the depreciation expense. Did a search for unrecorded liabilities to make sure that there was nothing hanging out there that we needed to record. Confirmed the debt and the revenues, and we did some data extraction analysis on the general ledger as far as payroll, subsequent disbursements, revenue analysis, and journal entry testing. The last page is just an overview of the financial results for 2019, going back to 2016. So in 2019, we had cash and investments of $23.9 million. We had net capital assets of $108.5 million. We had accounts payable and accrued expenses of $11.9 million. Bonds and notes payable of $66 million. Compensated absences of $2.7 million. The OPEB liability of $10.3 million, and the pension liability of $151 million. That leaves us with a net position of a negative $100 million. On the statement of activities side, we had property taxes of $74.5 million, other taxes of $8.7 million, grants of $8.9 million, and investment earnings of about $1 million. Now, on the expense side, we had instruction of $49.4 million, support services of $34.8 million, operation of non-instruction services of $2 million, interest and outstanding debt of $2.6 million, and food service expenses of $1.5 million. The change in net position for the year was a positive $21.4 million. On the governmental fund side, so the general fund, this is your main operating fund. We had a total fund balance at the end of the year of $13.4 million, and the net change in the fund balance on the general fund was a positive $1.8 million. In the food service fund, we had net position at the end of the year of about $321,000. Change in net position of the year of $112,646. General fund expenditures, instruction made up $62.3 million, support $33.5 million, and non-instructional $1.5 million. Are there any questions?
Any questions, Mr. Winters?
Yeah. Can you help explain for the instruction on this, in 19 at 49 million, and the net change in net position. My understanding from the Finance Committee, it was related to the contractual changes.
It's related to the PSERs. So if you look at the top, under the OPEB and the net pension liability, you'll see that they decreased from the prior year. So all that flowed through the expense in the current year. So the number that at the bottom of the page, the 62.3 million, is the more realistic number.
So the other post-employment benefits from 24 to 10?
Correct.
That was a contractual change with the MAA?
With the PSERs, yes. It
Yeah.
was based on the investment results of their portfolio.
Anything else, Mr. Winters?
Just to clarify, on the other post-employment benefits, you're saying? Or on the net pension liability?
Both. They both go through PSERs. Plus, you have a second plan that is outside of PSERs, but
Okay.
Anyone else to my left? Ms. Drummond?
Can you speak to the increase in investment earnings that in 2016 was 88,000, now is 924,000? I mean, it's great, but can you explain why?
that would just be based on, number one, the markets, and number two, the increase in the balances. So, I mean, the balances in the investments, in 2016, it was 16.2 million, but now it's almost 24 million. Last year, it was 28.7 million. So as the investment balance increases, so will the investment earnings.
Okay, and I guess, are those earnings being achieved through, I guess my real question is, are those investment earnings being achieved through with the same amount of risk, too?
Well, school districts and all local governments in Pennsylvania are restricted by law as to what they can invest in.
Anyone else to my left? Mr. Winters again?
Maybe Brian or somebody else on the Finance Committee can, I believe, though, this other post-employment benefits has something to do with our change related to the over 65 requirements for medical and the liabilities associated with those.
Yes.
That was a big
I'm sorry, your
portion.
single employer plan did have a change in benefit terms, yes.
Okay, and this was the first contractual year that took place?
Correct, yeah, and it's noted in the financial statements, in the big thick one that you got.
Yeah. So that, just for the audience is not seeing these numbers, it was 24 million in 2018 under the old rules and 10 million for post-employment benefits in 2019 after the contractual change.
Correct. So in like 2017, before GASB 75 came into play, it was only 5.5 million. And then when GASB 75 came into play, then it jumped up to 24 million. And then when you made your change to the plan, now it dropped back down to 10.
Yeah, I just wanted to...
Anyone else to my left? If not, to my right? Mr. Navarrete, just want to make sure, nothing? Okay. Any other questions from members of the board? If not, thank you so much. We'll have this on the agenda for your adoption next week, and if approved, we will post it then to the district website as we do annually with the audit. Thank you very much. Next on the agenda, we have the high school gymnasium floor update. Mr. Fretz, if you don't mind, I just want to let the board know that, and I know you already do know, we've also had some communications out with the public that a few weeks ago, we, as a result of human error, we had the gymnasium flooded from water from the pool. With that, Mr. Fretz, started a process by which we were able to identify, what the impact is of that, or will be of that water, and we got emergency approval from the state to move forward with addressing it immediately. And so with that, we know that we're in a stage right now where I believe, if I'm correct, we've worked with the insurance company to take care of the matter, along with having a vendor. I believe it's Miller
Flooring.
And they've already removed the floor.
That's correct.
And we're in the process of waiting for wood to come this week.
Yes.
Is there any other details that you'd like to share with the board?
Sure, I mean, it happened on the 26th. As you're aware, Dr. Zerbe did a great job there explaining what was going on. But in that time frame, we've done a few things. One, realizing that the pool room and the actual backwash room are at two different locations. So when the staff member was doing the work, he felt that the valve was closed, it came out of these tanks, and now we're putting in place something that would work as an overflow. It's important to note, and also some other devices in that room that would help with early determination if we had an issue ever again with that particular system. But we are on schedule right now. I didn't have an update yet today on whether the wood's coming tomorrow, but I'm hopeful that that's happening, and we're going to begin the recovery process.
So I'll take any questions from the board from my right.
So
Ms. Reese?
if the wood comes on time or this week, barring any issues, we're still on track for end of December?
That's correct.
So just to give the board the rest of the information, so how this has impacted us for our teams, for our gym classes, and for our community groups, please know that we've made arrangements for the use of the gyms in the high school. There are two other gyms in the high school that are being used for cheerleading as well as for wrestling. Boys and girls basketball has moved to other locations within the district, Arcola and Skyview for practices. And through December, they'll be doing doubleheaders away, where those schools will reciprocate that, and we'll do doubleheaders here once our new floor is in place. So some of our teams playing in some of those other locations have impacted the use of our gymnasium by our community youth groups, but we're certainly working with them and trying to provide all the potential opportunities that we can for them. So it's an unfortunate situation. I think Dr. Spiewak, Dr. Sorgini, Mr. Fretz did an outstanding job in coordinating all the matters, working with Mr. Bricker and making sure that we got the insurance on board and on site to take care of this as fast. So I don't see how we could work any faster on this, knowing that this was at the heart of a major athletic season, and we're apologizing for the situation we're in, but hopefully with some of the things that we put in place to help prevent this from ever happening again, not only procedural wise, but also with systems, and also I know we have some electronic monitoring things that we're going to be putting in place as well. That should all help give us a much sooner indication if this matter would start, or water would start to be coming out of any of those locations. So other questions? Right, Mr. Navarrete, do you have any comments? I'm not sure what that is.
I can mute myself, yeah. Yeah, just a note, I know I said this on Monday in property, but I did have the chance to walk the system with Mark right after this happened. And I know you made a comment about human error, and I think there's always a human component to these kinds of incidents. But in this case, I think there was a lack of proper engineering controls and maybe even procedural controls that could have prevented this. So Mark and I did walk through exactly what his plans are to prevent this from happening again. I'm satisfied from a technical standpoint that what we've put in place is appropriate to prevent something like this from happening again.
Thank you for that input. Anyone else to my right? If not, oh yeah, Ms. Hall?
Just from the athletics department, were they able to, are we hosting any home games within any of our facilities for like the high school basketball team, boys and girls? Or are we using other facilities for some of those? Or have everything been moved to away?
I believe that there may be 1 or 2 home wrestling matches that may occur in one of the auxiliary gyms in the high school. They're not impacted for practice because they have their own space for practice, but I believe that they said that for 1 or 2 of the matches they could hold based on the available seating in one of the auxiliary gyms. For boys and girls basketball, I am not aware that any games have been scheduled for Arcola Skyview, and if they were, it would certainly be very difficult to see. Seating's not plentiful there. in either of those two locations.
But you feel for the wrestling matches that seating would be adequate?
Yes.
Okay.
Any questions to members on my left? Mr. Earnshaw?
As far as the cost of this, is insurance covering it fully other than any deductible or anything like that?
Yes, all but $5,000 deductible. Is that working there? All but a $5,000 deductible, sorry.
Ms. Cancrill?
My only comment was if there was high school, I appreciate all the communication. I think the community was very appreciative. I was at the Arcola gym, and it really, if high school students were going to perform there are mats ripped up against the wall. I just feel that because this has happened, I think there's more eyes on our gyms that are currently being utilized. On both sides, there's huge gouges in there, and if they're older kids, they're more aggressive. It just doesn't look nice, and I didn't want other schools to see it.
Understood.
Good point, and just so you know, that conversation was held today with the Assistant Principal for Athletics and Activities and myself, and we're working with Mr. Fretz to see what we can do to replace those, because what you didn't mention is there's actually duct tape on some of them as well. Yeah, so, you know, you want to go further? Let's just say it's bad enough that these need to be replaced, and so I just want the board to understand that, yeah, it's been brought to our attention, and we're moving on it, so thank you. Any other questions related to the high school gymnasium or to the mat set on the wall at the Arcola? No. Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank
appreciate
you.
it. Next on the agenda, we have the master plan progress update. We have Fadavia Dansakala. Welcome, Dan.
Welcome and good evening. It's more of an introduction to the next two presentations than an update. If you might remember, there's 8 projects in the master plan. 2 of the larger projects that we're contemplating represent items 4 and 5 and 6. Actually, 5 is not. The 4th project is we have a very large mechanical project that's being designed and getting ready to be put out to bid on the high school. The high school project is essentially a lot of equipment and a lot of communication between that equipment, but beyond that, and Mark and these 2 gentlemen will explain when they get up here, there's a lot of other communication and connectivity that is not just with regard to the high school, but district-wide, and they'll be talking about that in a minute. Item 5 is not the high school main entrance facade. You might recall we approved work last year to be done this summer at the high school with regard to masonry repair work, and during that repair work, it was determined that we needed to make changes, replace the facade right at the main entrance. And SRE, Shepherd Restoration, there's 2 ladies that are going to address both what was presented at Property Committee and then what was modified post-Property Committee comments. Similarly, so again, 5 was not a master plan 2020 project. Item 6 is a 2020 master plan project where, as again, you're all familiar with the need to replace part of the facade at Eagleville, and similarly, those concepts were presented at Property, and again, SRE will be presenting both what was given to Property, the feedback from Property, and the modifications that were made, and to keep things moving along at the pace that we need to move at. Dr. Zerbe thought it would be appropriate to bring it to the board at large to hear what was, physically see what was presented, and an opportunity to provide comments so we can keep moving. That's it in a nutshell. If you have any questions.
Just for the high school project, the MEP, I'm not sure that the board remembers that it's the unit ventilators that we're discussing, if you could go further into that.
Yeah, the unit ventilators, and we're for budgetary reasons and to have the best options when we get to the point of awarding a project, we're breaking up the building into different areas, so it'll be bid as separate packages, so we have the option to do, I think we're breaking it into 3 different pieces, so we can do all of it or part of it. That's the project. I mean, I can go into the details of why we're breaking it up. It'll get you the best value on bid day, and you'll have the best chance to make the best economical decision for the district. But yeah, it's a complete replacement of the balance of the unit ventilators around the building. So if there are no more questions, I guess we'll roll right into Mark's presentation.
Yeah, so I think what's important is, and I'm not sure that this was said, because I was doing something while he was speaking, so I apologize if I'm repeating something that was already said. But I want to make sure that with this high school project, the
Are you
matters
talking about the
of-
facade, or which one?
Oh, good point. So with the high school project, in terms of the unit ventilators and we'll call it the MEP project. We want to make sure that, going forward, we have the proper systems and oversight as part of, and double checks, because it's such a large project, that both the systems integrator and the systems commissioning is something that we're bringing forward for the board's consideration. Now, we haven't necessarily had either of these on other projects, but we're at the point in time in terms of for the systems integrator to look at a system whereby we use a computer system to control all our HVAC systems, and the thing that we have in place now through Siemens is not providing us the level of flexibility and continuity across systems that we need in order to properly manage our buildings. And in addition to that, the systems at the high school, as well as in other facilities across the district, not all, but most, have reached their end of life. So we're at a point where in the presentation to the property committee, the conversation about using and preparing for an open system whereby we're not tied to a specific vendor to provide on-site support, where we can use a vendor that supports us and create the relationship to be responsive, allows us to be more flexible and meet the needs of the heating and air conditioning needs within the district. So that's the first part. The second part, in the system commissioning, while we put our bid specifications together and working with more engineering and doing this, it's important that the board understands that experts in terms of the systems that we need and the systems that we have, that the specifications as they're outlined are installed properly, and then they are tested, so that the things that we are asking for and buying to do a specific purpose actually work to the degree that we need them to work. So it's not a matter of just saying we have a specification, they put the stuff in, and it doesn't work together. So the commissioning process allows us to confirm that the engineer's recommendations in the bid specifications are consistent with what needs to be done, and that at the end, this commissioning agent or systems integrator, this commissioning person, does the double check to make sure all the systems work the way they're supposed to. So that's a summary. I don't want to necessarily take over the presentation.
Stole his
There may be
thunder,
other
but
details.
that's it, yeah.
But I just want to make sure that it's critical that you understand that these two are very important things. It's new as part of our overall conversation, but we've not crossed this bridge before. We've not come to you saying that we need a new system. We've not come to you with such a large project that requires us to have these systems and ensure that these systems work, because there's a number of systems that will remain in place. There's a number of systems that will be added, and all that needs to make sure that it works together. So we need something to be 72 degrees and 72 degrees consistently. The systems work the way they're designed to work and the way we expect them to work, and the contractors are held responsible to the commissioners, people. So I recommend that we do this.
Yeah, and this is not
It's
novel.
too large not to do.
Yeah, it's
So
not
Dan, go
novel.
ahead.
Every district is grappling with this issue. The technology keeps changing. Again, these are the experts. Where'd Mark go? That's right there. You're an expert too, but these are the experts. And a lot of school districts are stuck with a proprietary system that they try to work around and deal with. And there's a lot of firms out there that do it. You have one of them. The commissioning is a pretty typical thing. Nowadays, it wasn't years ago before you didn't have a commissioning agent, but it's pretty much routine now. And again, on the size project, like Dr. Zerbe said, you kind of have to do it. But in any event, unless you have any questions, I'll turn it to Mark. Pardon me? Yeah.
So tonight, good evening. So tonight, Tim Roten from Eastern Air Balance is here to talk about testing and balancing our systems. And likewise, Kurt Twyford from Connexus, these gentlemen are both presidents of their company. They've been performing these types of services for many years for many school districts, government agencies, and the like. This is something that is required by the LEED. If we were doing a LEED building, as you move forward, this is something that's required by LEED. It's really at a critical crossroads for Methacton School District because we have an opportunity to, I'm going to say, hit it out of the park because of the current platforms that are out there, the open protocols, the opportunity for us to select the right platform to begin with, to be able to move forward with the right software, and the ability for us to be able to move forward when we do other buildings. And as Dr. Zerbe had pointed out, not being necessarily tied to one manufacturer, we're going to be able to have many manufacturers be able to bid our projects. So again, Tim Roten, start out, and then Kurt. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Tim Roten. I'm the president of Eastern Air Balance. Just wanted to take the opportunity to give you a brief overview of commissioning services for your high school project. One of the biggest things that commissioning does is it gives you verification of how your systems are designed, installed, started up, turned over, and ultimately how you operate them at the end of the day. The two biggest reasons why commissioning has become more and more prevalent, especially in the public school market, number one is the low bid. You guys are, by law, you have to take the low bid from mechanical, electrical, and plumbing contractors. So you're not necessarily always going to get the best installation, the best project, simply because you're forced to hire the low bid contractor. So the commissioning is a process through measurement, verification, documentation that ensures that everything that the engineer designs into the project is installed in accordance with the plans and specifications, and at the end of the project, everything is tested and verified to operate in accordance with those documents. One of the things that is critical is to get the commissioning agent involved early in the process prior to bid. As Dr. Zerbe mentioned, one of the key things is for the specifications to have enough teeth to them so that the contractors know exactly what the expectations are for how equipment and systems are to be installed and how they're supposed to be operated. Too many times there's not a performance-based specification that provides enough details as far as exactly how something is to be installed or how it's supposed to function. So one of the purposes of this is to make sure prior to bid that all those items are included in the specification, and then they can be tested and verified at the conclusion of the project. Probably the biggest thing besides the low bid requirement for the public market you're in is the complexity of the systems. Everything in the building is computer controlled, computer driven, technology changes every day, and there has to be a means for all these systems to communicate with one another and to work together cohesively. So what commissioning does is it develops a process to test and verify that all these parts and pieces play nice together and give you a system that functions the way you want to at the end of the day. A lot of people will ask, aren't I paying for this already? You've hired a construction manager in Fidavia. They do a wonderful job. A lot of what other things and other people do are just static inspections. It's a visual observation of how something is installed. And those are fine and well, but what commissioning offers is just a detailed, documented measurement and verification process that goes above and beyond what a visual observation can do. So that's the big difference. It definitely is a cost savings. The Department of Energy in a recently released study says that for buildings that are commissioned in the first year of operation, the average energy savings are between 8 and 20% for a commissioned building versus a non-commissioned building. And where your HVAC systems are probably one of the biggest energy users in your building, that's a large number. So it's something that could definitely be a big savings. So those are the basic outlines of the process. Are there any questions?
Any questions from members of my left? Ms. Drummond?
What is the deliverable that we receive from?
The deliverable at the end of the day is a commissioning report, which is written documentation, verification that everything is installed and operating in accordance with the design documents. And that can also be used, very importantly, as a maintenance tool after the fact, because if something were to fail or Mark and his staff need to go and verify if something is still operating the way it once did, there's already a test process in place that is documented that they can go and repeat.
So it breaks down all the components of what was
breaks down all the
installed,
components.
the testing that was done.
Right. It tests everything at a component level and at a system level.
Okay, and how each component performed in the test?
Individually
so that
and
you
then
can-
as a complete system, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, members of my left? How about members of my right? Ms. Hall?
Just looking at the presentation, I'm trying to understand that you are present for the bid process,
Yes,
construction process,
correct.
and then can you explain warranty phase commissioning services?
So there are certain things, depending upon when the building finishes, that you simply can't test. Like right now, wouldn't be a good time to test to see if the chiller worked or do cooling. So there's some things that have to be done on opposite season. It's called deferred testing. Or there are some things that there's always one or two stragglers that just don't get finished by the time you occupy the building that are more of like a warranty issue. There's a issue with a component or something that doesn't work. So those are things that, once it's turned over, we're not going to walk away from. We'll make sure all those items get handled and corrected.
I think one of the questions and one of the things I want to make clear to the members of the board is that on item 9E1, there's an agenda item there, and I want to make sure that as it reads, it says approve Eastern Air Balance of Mannheim proposal design phase commissioning services for $15,500. I want to make sure that you understand that that is for design phase portion of this project, which is my understanding that that'll take us up to when the bids get released.
Correct.
And then can you tell the board a little bit about what the rest of the commissioning process might entail? Is it typically a percentage or some other
Typically
fee
it's a
generally?
percentage. It's in the presentation. It's typically it's 0.5% to 1.5% of the total construction cost for just commissioning. The commissioning services are based solely on the number of pieces and the number of individual points and devices in each system that have to be tested. So you could have a 10,000 square foot space and there could be 2 unit ventilators in there, or there could be 20 unit ventilators. It all depends on the number of pieces of equipment.
So that's not technically a number you can give to us now?
No, we can't do that until the documents are completed.
Right, so I just want to make sure the board knows that this, approving this only gets us through the bids out in the market and doesn't actually do the actual testing. That there would be another cost if we were to move forward with that second phase. So there's only technically 2 phases, this phase and then the...
Design phase and the construction phase, yes.
Okay.
I think after 4 years, Dr. Zerby knows where I'm going with these questions. Knows exactly where I was going with the total cost and what the 9E1 covered. So that is just the design phase aspect of this.
Yes, sir.
And at this point in time, you don't even have a ballpark estimate as to what the second phase of this would cost,
I have not.
based off of what systems and everything that we select.
No, sir.
The only other question I had was in terms of, so if everything goes through, you've been here every step of the phase, comes to the end and things aren't working, you stay on or the commissioning agent stays on until everything is 100% before you walk away,
Yes,
correct?
sir. Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions to my right? Mr. Navarrete? No? Okay. Any other questions for members of the board? Okay. Mr. Fretz, next.
Good evening. I'm Kurt Twyford. My company is Connexus, and Dr. Zerbe did a great job of summarizing our work already, so hopefully I don't further confuse things. It was pretty good summarization already. Connexus is a 25-person building automation system integrator. We do work all out throughout eastern and central Pennsylvania. All we do is controls. So I'm not the expert, but I have 25 or 24 experts back at the office. And all we do is controls every day. It has become very complex, which is why there's more and more of a need for someone who specializes like us in helping school districts and municipalities and government agencies deal with the complexities of smart building technologies and make sure they're getting what they really should be getting. Third page or second page, there just listed some of our experience. We're currently serving as MSI, Master System Integrator, for Villanova University. Exact same scenario that Mr. Fretz has asked us to look at for you all here, which is to allow them to still have competitive bidding on their building projects. So the control systems that go in each building are still done to a limited list of qualified contractors, and then we serve as the master system integrator to make sure those buildings are then brought into their campus-wide system in a unified manner. So, and we can talk more about that in some details here, but there's just some of our school districts and our government agencies and customers that we deal with there. So what is a master system integrator? So basically what we are is we are the nonpartisan representative to Mr. Fretz and Methacton School District to help you get through the complicated world of building automation systems. We deal only in open and non-proprietary systems. That is something I think Mr. Fretz was happy to hear about, because we believe that you as a school district should have the choice as to who you work with and not be stuck with a proprietary system. We specialize in helping clients migrate away from proprietary systems like you have. And so we know how to do that, and we know how to write specifications. So the first phase of our engagement with you is the $5,000 not to exceed number, and that is just for design to work hand in hand with more engineering, with Mr. Fretz, with Fidavia and with Eastern, to develop what's known as a guide specification. It should be a specification that basically sets the platform, sets the foundation for your future. You've got a lot of building programs coming up here over the next 5 to 10 years. You're going to spend a lot of money. Now is the time to set the standard for what your building automation systems look like, to allow you to confidently bid work, know it's going to come in at the same standards, and then we as a system integrator in the second phase will bring those systems into the district-wide integration platform that'll give you the single seat kind of window into your systems that you're looking for. We only use open, non-proprietary systems, so the system we would suggest that you put in that place is something that multiple people in the area can work on. We would hope you would continue to work with us on that, but the beauty is you have a choice to go other places if not. So first phase, though, is the $5,000 not to exceed. That sets that foundation, that sets that guide specification. Any work that we would have to work with Eastern Air Balancing on during construction would be pretty limited, just the time and material basis. Mark might need a little bit of, or not Mark, Tim might need a little bit of help in the commissioning side, but he's very, very good at that, and I don't think we'll need a lot of time from our experts on that. That would move into the second phase. At that point, kind of the same spot where Tim would be proposing on the construction commissioning, that's when we would offer up our proposal for the first phase, which would be the integration platform. And that would probably be about $20,000 in the high school. It is in lieu of the cost that you would pay your contractor on the job anyway for. So it's really a zero sum. We might charge a little more for it because we're setting up some of the economy of scale that allows you to scale that up for the rest of the projects. But it's essentially the same price as what the contractor is going to charge you anyway, so there's really no cost to do that. Trying to sort of outline a little bit the next page there, which is this one here, just a simple graphic. How do we all fit? So in the high school project and any other future capital projects, you got Fidavia serving as Methacton's program manager. We would serve as the master system integrator directly with you to integrate those buildings into the Niagara platform, which is that open, non-proprietary front end, as it's called in our world. And then each capital project would be bid to a select list of qualified building automation system contractors. So you're getting quality, you're getting good pricing, and they are complying with the standards that we have worked on together. Next page is another effort to sort of try and simplify how we all fit together. During the design phase, you got more engineering doing the MEP design. Eastern will be reviewing construction documentation. Tim already talked about what he does. We're going to work with the team to develop that guide specification so that you're getting solid numbers from your bidding. On the construction side, Moore does the construction administration. Eastern's doing the commissioning they talked about. We're there to help on a time and material basis. If Tim needs some help, we're happy to help out there where we can. Again, I don't expect a lot there. And then on the operate and maintain side, after the project's been complete, that's when our master system integration piece kicks in, where we're really helping more on the front end piece and that integration platform. That's pretty much it. We talked about why would you need the master system integrator in the last slide. We sort of talked about some of those topics, but happy to answer any questions.
Any members to my right? Mr. Navarrete?
Yeah, what's the working relationship between Connexus and Eastern Air Balance? Have you guys worked together before?
We have. He has, his firm has done testing and balancing on our systems, and he's done some commissioning on our systems too. I think one of the areas where I think Tim has really grown to appreciate our expertise is that when we serve as a contractor, we have implemented the Corps of Engineers commissioning procedures on all our projects. I don't believe that when Tim commissions one of our projects that he should find anything. No, he might. He might be talking about a couple hundred points in a lot of areas, but our job is to make sure he doesn't find anything. So I think one of the reasons why Tim, why Eastern and Connexus have worked so well together is because he trusts our commissioning procedures, and he knows our systems work. And we're pleased to be able to represent Methacton School District on the other side now and making sure that what you get in the field is properly commissioned.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Anybody else to my right? If not, how about my left? Ms. Drummond?
Can you just talk more about how this looks also district-wide with other buildings that we might bring on?
So what we would do is, as a part of the second phase, which is that integration platform, we would work with Mr. Fretz and his team, anyone else in the administration who would be working in the system, show you what our standards are, and then customize to create your standard. And so a usual graphical user interface, or front end, if I can call it that, would have usually a Google map of your entire facility, so they're easy to find. And then as the projects get integrated in, you would have a graphical representation of the school, and then the floor plan of the school, and then detail of each area of the school. Depending on the size of the school, how much it would fit on a screen, so you might have to break it up into segments, but a floor plan, and then each floor plan will be hyperlinked to the pieces of equipment that serve that school. Probably not too dissimilar to what you already have. And then we can customize with how you want alarming done, schedules, trending, so you can actually look historically how the system operates. The system we would recommend is called Tritium Niagara 4. It's a completely open, non-proprietary system. I mentioned earlier, in the Philadelphia metropolitan area, there's probably 10 different companies that work in Tritium. There's plenty of people out there who can work in it. But we would customize it. I mean, it's basically a series of web pages that are fully customizable. It's an open protocol system, so there are outside developers who can customize it too. Depending on what you want to do, there's maybe a little bit of upfront investment, but again, you've got a big building program coming up here. Tim mentioned, I usually throw out the quote that the systems that we control consume about 75% of your operating costs of a building, and yet the systems, and the upfront cost about 4%. Our work and the majority of the work is actually the building controls in the building itself. So 4% of the cost of construction, it's worth spending some extra time there because it controls the systems that generate, consume a lot of energy.
So the idea is that the standards are being established now to be implemented as we continue.
Yeah, and once we set those standards up, that's why I said, we may charge a little more than the contractor's going to charge on the first job, but once you have those standards set up, you bring those systems in, it's pretty easy at that point.
Any other questions to members on my left? Anyone else on the board? If not, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
I know it's not my turn. SRE is going to present. I just wanted to comment briefly, following up on Ralph's question. know Kurt's firm, I don't personally have a lot of experience. I know our firm has dealt with him before, but I'm aware of his reputation. And as far as Eastern Air Balancing, we've done a number of projects with them going back to probably about 15, 16 years, and they're like one of the best in the industry as far as respect and dependability. So again, the last couple items on the presentations, Ms. Shepard's here to present on behalf of her firm with regard to both the front entrance of the high school and also the Eagleville replacement. And thank you.
So to tee this up, so everyone understands, what's in front of us right now is the set of options to consider for not only the high school facade, front entrance, but also the Eagleville facade. Now, what our plan was and what we talked about in the property committee meeting is that this evening we would bring forward the suggestions associated with the discussion from the property committee meeting for your consideration. As you also know, or may or may not know, I sent an email out later this afternoon with some feedback on these drawings from the teaching staff at Eagleville. And with regards to our process here, it's our hope that if we get your input this evening and the input from the Eagleville teachers on both the Eagleville facade and the high school front entrance facade, that we could come forward for next week and get your approval on the design so that we can move forward with putting the rest of these documents together for the bid process. And the reason for that is timing. Our goal is to be as effective in our timing to get the documents on the street and back into your hands as consistent as possible with the rest of our 16 or so million dollars worth of other 2020 summer projects. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Teresa from Shepherd Restoration. Teresa?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Zerbe. I'm Teresa Shepherd, President of Shepherd Restoration Engineers. And before you, the first packet is the Methacton High School front entry facade project. We initially met with the property committee and presented a variety of different options and then took their feedback and then presented the packet before you, which has their ideas and recommendations that we further developed into some additional renderings. So the option number one is a combination of a cream-colored metal panel to tie into the limestone with an eyebrow of anodized aluminum to tie into the doors. And you'll see in the subsequent pages how this may tie into the proposed canopies over at the auditorium to the left. And on the following page, to the small canopy over the door to the right at the far end of the building. It's a very long building, so it's a little hard to capture all these in the renderings together, but it does give an idea of how they relate to one another. Then the option two is the metal panel, which is the cream color with a brick base. We have a brick base in order to be sure that we don't have any issues with lawnmowers and snow removing equipment banging into the lower levels where the walls are and the sidewalks. So we have a masonry material there. This option presents a canopy that has tie rods and also its relationship to the auditorium canopy on the left and the door canopy on the right. Then we had option three, which also has the eyebrow, and but the brick height is a little bit higher, coming to the underside of the small canopy. It's a very subtle change, but aesthetically it does make a difference. And again, its effect on the adjacent canopies. And option 4 basically takes the brick at the same height as an option 3, but shows it again with the hanger rod canopy in the anodized aluminum to match the existing doors and the column there. The last page, on page 14 of the presentation, it basically shows how these might get tied in together from a structural standpoint, where the shorter eyebrow type canopy doesn't project out very far. And then the longer canopy that requires a hanger rod tie back into the wall. So these are the different nuances of each scenario being proposed. Additional items that'll be worked out in the construction document portion of the work will be, we're working with the committee on the lettering and the fonts. It's been decided by the committee that the location of the lettering should be up at the higher level, as shown on all of these renderings. And we are also looking at lighting options, whether it's up lighting or down lighting or a combination of both, and then within the tolerances of your township ordinance.
So the goal for this evening is to get your feedback. So we're going to ask for feedback. People to my right. Ms. Reese, you want to make a comment?
Well, I'll just say from the property committee, thank you, just to give you guys some feedback. Shepherd gave us a lot of choices, and they were great, but they were also very, I don't know if you wouldn't, they toned it down a little bit, basically, to kind of fit into the Worcester community. And I had specifically asked, can we see what it looks like with this canopy that we're going to be adding? So thank you for doing that. You know, I don't, it's hard without cost, and I know you can't put it through the cost without narrowing it down, but I will just say, since I would assume the apron is cheaper than the canopy, and we had decided we needed canopies, or not the apron, the eyebrow, that the eyebrow is a little bit cheaper than the canopy. So I would imagine, since we didn't officially need a canopy there, but I do like the eyebrow to connect it all. That's about my thought. And as far as the brick, I don't have a strong enough opinion about whether it goes higher or lower, as long as we have some brick. So that's all I have there.
Before we take another comment, on the brick, meaning when we go to option 3, the reason it was suggested that the brick go up just a little higher, it's with the metal being within arm's reach. There's some potential that it can be scratched by individuals, reaching up there and damaging the material. So just like the idea behind putting the brick close to the ground, having the brick within arm's reach makes sense as well for the long-term upkeep and beautification of the metal material. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood what the purpose was there. Other questions from members to my right, or comments or feedback? Ralph, do you have any?
No, I actually don't have a copy of this drawing, so after I get a copy of it, I'll provide my feedback.
In terms of the eyebrow versus the canopy, what is the coverage difference? Obviously, the canopy appears to stand out a lot further. That's height. There's no...
I'm going to consult with Stephanie, but I believe the difference is, it's a 3.5-foot difference between the two.
3.5-foot difference, thank you. And in terms of, we briefly touched on price. Obviously, it sounds like the canopy would be more, but do we have a ballpark of what the difference in price is between the two?
No, we don't at this point.
We don't. But just without price considerations at this point, I like option 4. So, thank you.
I want to say thank you for the presentation. It was difficult to picture for me what the eyebrow would look like. And I do appreciate seeing the entire building in this. But I'm going to also say that I would have a preference for option 4.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to piggyback off of Mr. Ryan's question. So there's a 3.5-foot difference between the eyebrow and the canopy. What are the measurements in terms of each, for the depth from, how far it will project out from the building?
Okay, 18 feet on the eyebrow from the...
18 inches?
Of course, 18 inches, and then 5 feet on the hanger rod canopy.
Okay. And I would also agree that option 4 seems like it would be the best option then. I like the idea of having a little bit more of an actual shelter. And the 18 inches doesn't quite get you that, but the 5 feet does. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Comments? Ms. Drummond?
I guess I also like option 4, but are there occasions where anyone has been like, wow, I really wish we had a canopy to stand under at the high school? I don't know. I just don't know if we're putting it there because it looks nice or because there's actually a reason for it. But I like it, and what I like about it is, and I think I'm seeing lights there, and that's what I think I like about it. Like the why of the canopy for me would be the lighting.
Yes, yes.
And I like the aesthetics of the brick coming up to the level of the canopy. So I also concur with option 4. Thank you.
So Teresa, could you talk about the lighting for a second and what was discussed in property committee with regards to the canopy?
Sure. Well, we had discussed our options of being able to provide uplighting, and I'm sorry we don't have that. We had done a nighttime rendering, and I'm sorry we don't have that here, that provides uplighting to illuminate the metal, the beige-colored metal panel area with the letters, and would also provide an opportunity for downlighting to obviously light the entrance area, because you don't have a tremendous amount of light there right now, so it would be an improvement. So those can lights that you see on the front page, which is a picture of what was there before, will be eliminated.
Thank you.
And can I just add something real quick? So just to give a little background, when we decided to do the canopy and the egresses, we did that out of need. We needed some egresses, we needed the canopies. So there was never supposed to be a canopy on this entrance based on need. But when the facade decided to break, then we were like, well, okay, now we have this opportunity to make it a tiny bit better. So my thought with the eyebrow, and I don't care what happens, it's not a big, I don't have anything invested in this, is there was never supposed to be a canopy because there was no need for a canopy. The need for the canopy was supposed to be over by the auditorium. That's where people congregate. This entrance had a small thing. But when we saw what Shepherd had decided to do with the facade, we were like, well, let's at least possibly make it look like what it's going to look like on the left entrance. So that's where that kind of came from, if that makes any sense. I'm not saying I don't like option 4, but what I'm saying is we need to be careful here with need versus what looks pretty, to be honest. And what, aesthetics.
But adding the canopy, would that not improve some of the water infiltration into the building?
Well, the doors are recessed into the alcove, so what it will prevent will be a drip line that I imagine would occur right when you come into that entrance there. So it would eliminate that, so it would allow protection for people going into the building, especially if you're larger groups of people going in at the same time.
Question. Any other questions from members of my left? Mr. Earnshaw?
No, I guess my comment is, what you explained with the higher level brick makes sense to me, so I'm between option 3 and 4, and if there's not a material cost difference between option 3 and 4, I'd go with 4, but to the extent the canopy is a significant number, I'd go with 3.
Ms. Cancro?
No, I agree with Brian.
Mr. Winters?
Number 1. No. Yeah, everybody's comment, 1 or 3.
3 or 4.
Right.
One, no, that's what counts.
Mr. Ryan?
Just as a quick follow-up, so the next thing that would come between us would be what the cost difference would be. So if 3 and 4 are 2 top options, the next thing that will come before us is here's the 2 options with the price, so that we'll be able to make the decision then. Not, it sounds like everybody said 4, so here's option 4. We still want the future comparison, correct? We'll get that.
Is that what we want? That's the question.
I would say yes.
So you want a comparison, 3 and 4, not 1, is that right? Okay, all right. So 3 and 4, and we'll be able to bring, I guess the question is, I don't mean to put you on the spot, do you know when you'd be able to provide that cost comparison?
Well, what we're going to do is we're going to reach out to actual contractors and get their cost opinions on this to be sure that it's in the ballpark and it's realistic based upon the existing conditions.
Okay.
And then we'll present that to you as soon as we get it. So I would hope that we will be able to get that within a week or so.
So we would likely need that before Tuesday's meeting, if at all possible. Is that possible? Because I think the board, before they would make a decision on 3 or 4, they would have to know the cost.
Sure.
So we could have that.
Sure.
By Monday, maybe.
Sure.
Does that work?
We will work diligently to get it to you by the end of the day on Monday.
Okay. Excellent.
Could I ask,
yes.
could I ask also if you, for option 4, could you include a night rendering?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
And one other question.
Yes.
When we first met to talk about this, when the issue with the stone was found and we decided to take the stone down, we had talked about looking at the metal panels, and there was some preliminary cost information provided. Were any other options looked at from a cost efficiency and effectiveness standpoint? It seems like all 4 of these options are the same metal panel type of facade. Just the difference is whether we do the canopy or the level of the brick.
Right. Well, during the initial development of some preliminary schematic ideas, we had an aesthetic that very closely mimicked what was there originally, to diverging to something that was much more modern. So what happened is that through the course of that, we ended up with a hybrid of the metal panel and the brick. So the preliminary estimated cost was roughly $55 to $75 per square foot for the metal panel. So that cost will change a little bit with the introduction of more brick and with the installation of any type of an eyebrow or canopy in that area, and then whatever additional lighting is needed to illuminate this at night.
But was there any evaluation at the committee level as part of this to look at, if we just ran brick all the way up front, all the way up, what would that cost be, or some other material to kind of see, are we talking 100,000 versus 50 or 150 versus 100, and trying to get a sense of?
Well, I think, we left it to our professionals to give us some recommendations. Partly, the facade is partly an aesthetic matter, mostly. So, I don't know if running all the way brick up would look very nice, considering we're trying to address the front entrance, or the main entrance of the high school, that would look similar to all the other parts of the building, especially those that are on both sides. So, I guess the question is, in your experience, does the metal paneling, where does it sit financially in terms of the options that are available to schools to make these, we'll call it, visually significant areas stand
The
out?
metal panel is often a little less expensive, mainly because it's not as much labor as it is to install the bricks. There's always a trade-off between material costs and labor costs and time to install. So the metal panel system is less time to install, and on a square foot basis, it probably is a little less expensive even than the actual brick to install. So, as a hybrid option, which is what we're showing here, you'll have the cost differential between the metal panel and the brick. So if it were all brick, if it were all masonry, it would cost more than if it were all metal panel.
would you use any other materials for buildings like this to dress it up in a manner that, I'm just trying to clarify this question, so, because we want to get to a final decision next week.
Sure. Other options that we had presented were using more glass and some other different types of materials, which really didn't work well with the nature of the building that you have. I mean, you have a lot of brick, you have the limestone, and the property committee didn't like a tremendous departure from the architecture that's there, so we reeled it back in, as was mentioned, and we went with a more conservative appearance.
No, you phrased it right now, so I was looking to get where does this fall in the spectrum of possible options. It sounds like this is kind of a mid-range, cost-effective type solution. Fair.
Right. In terms of what the possibilities are, this is probably less than mid-range.
That's exactly where I was looking to get to. Thank you. I appreciate it. Took a while to get there, but.
Sorry. And Brian, just so you know, they did show us like 3 different types of panels, and we talked about specific color, like ordering specific color, like not necessary. And the one option that we said no to was like actually bumping it out and making it almost more 3D, which would require more work. And you would have been happy as the finance chair with our decisions.
Any other questions for Teresa on the high school facade? So just to summarize this real quick, option 3, option 4, a rendering for nighttime, and the cost differential between the two.
Yes.
Is that, everybody in agreement with that? All right, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
We'll go on to the next item.
Okay. The next project is the Eagleville Elementary School recladding. And the packet that you have in front of you lists options 1 and 2, which were developed from the property committee's selection of option D, which was previously presented to them. And it's my understanding that the options were also shared with the teachers, and teachers provided some input as well, which we just received. So they're not yet incorporated in the documents that you have, but they will certainly be reviewed and incorporated and discussed. So in the packet that you have, of course, we have the photographs of the existing building. And then the second page is our computer rendering of the existing building. And then in the preliminary property committee meeting, they had selected option D as the one to develop farther. And that involved a pattern on the left side of between the metal panel and the brick, which was a little bit of a playful creation between the metal panel and the brick. So we took that idea and we incorporated the metal panel and ran it across to the stair tower element. We did increase the height of the stair tower element, which is really just a basic parapet, to give a little more emphasis to the entrance. And in this option 1, the metal panel is a beige color, which ties into the cast stone of the original structure. We also did a rendering of what it would look like on the back side where the playground is. Option 2 is the same playful arrangement between the metal panel and the brick in a blue color, and also a cream-colored metal panel, and how it might look on the playground side. And option 3, which is a red, if they wanted to try to stay more in the red brick tone, and how it might look on the playground side. And then the last page shows a detail of how the metal panel and the brick may interface. What we're doing is we're keeping the metal panel within about 1/2 inch of the brick face. The face of the metal panel and the face of the brick are close together, so that we don't have to make any adjustments to hose bibs and other penetrations through the wall that currently exists and will continue to remain. One component of this job, which adds another just level of complexity, is the louvers that you see underneath these windows. As part of the MEP improvements project scheduled for this building, which is scheduled for next year, not this year, we need to, as we go through the cladding design, we need to develop a detail that can be installed this year, but then it can be interchangeable for whatever the mechanical system is for next year. So that's part of the detailing that we will be looking at once we get a little more direction on the and response on the design options. So some of the so if you had any questions or comments, there were a number of different options that looked different than this that were presented to the property committee, and some that involved looking at bays of 4 windows in alternating colors, but it seemed as though that of all the options that were presented, that the option with the variable heights of the brick versus the metal panel on the left end was desirable.
I'll start with my left. Mr. Winters picks number 1.
I'm sorry. Can you just explain, we have 2 packets here. There was the cladding and the recladding were the definitions. You said, I think, option 1. So you walked through the first one, and then the recladding was the other options that were presented to the property.
Oh, yes, yes. I apologize. The packet with the options A, B, C, and D, they were the initial renderings that we gave to the property committee.
Okay.
And this is where option A was more of a playful design, being that it's an elementary school, with alternating colors in the bays and in metal panel, with a common brick base at the wall. Option B is more of a clean line approach between the metal panel and the brick. This is shown in gray, but of course it could be in any color, with an anodized aluminum on the stair tower. Option C is an anodized aluminum on the left end and a green metal panel on the stair tower and adjacent to that. And then option D, this is the one that the property committee liked the most for us to develop further. The commentary was that they liked the playfulness, but not necessarily the gray. So we took those comments and incorporated that into the second packet that you have.
So if we talk, it's hard to do this without numbers, honestly, but generally, are we saying from the previous conversation on the high school, we're saying that the metal is from a total cost of installation and material is generally cheaper than the brick?
That's correct. Now, on this particular project, we had looked at we spoke with contractors and vendors and had a ballpark idea of what it would cost if all of the areas that we had to address were in metal panel versus whether it was in all brick, basically going back with what you have. And there was a significant cost differential between those two.
With all brick?
Correct. So this is what we call a hybrid option.
Yeah. So from an insulating aspect, and we're talking about improving our systems, or HVAC system, is there an improvement on, is there insulating variance between the brick and the metal? or are they going to provide the same type of insulating? Right now, I think it's my understanding of the property committee, pretty much non-existence from an insulating point of view.
Correct.
So it's going to be an improvement, I understand, but if between these two materials, is there a difference? Is like, and if I look at option one, will the second floor be highly better insulated than, no?
Insulation is continuous. It's just the cladding that changes.
The insulation is continuous along the wall. It's just the cladding on the outside of that changes. And then we are working with the mechanical engineer to provide an insulating value, an R value, that works with what their expectations are for the system that they're installing, to make sure that we're all on the same page.
I assume then also, because we ended up at this design for the same reason, to keep the metal from being accessible to hands and so forth. All right. I would say option one, believe it or not, after all that.
That's what I said when I first introduced you. Thank you, Mr. Winter. Sorry for putting you on. I know there's a lot of information, and certainly I know it's going to take, even additional, thought from the members of the board. Anyone else from on my left? Ms. Cancro?
My question is the cream colored. A lot of times I think when you look at a building, sometimes it's got that mold, a little bit of green or discoloring that you have to constantly either power wash with metal. It's in, it's even on our homes. Like I have a cream color siding. Do you find that with this material that you will have to do that type of maintenance to prevent discoloring the green?
I think that, as with any building, if your buses come up here to the curb, over time, you'll get that carbon on the buildings, just like you do downtown. It's just it'll take a little bit more time because you don't have as dense traffic. And then also on north faces of building, you will always end up, in this region, you will always end up with a little bit of discoloration. But it's not anticipated that outside of normal regular cleaning that you would have to do in any building, this would require any more.
If I had a choice, I'd go for the gray. just for cleanliness, but option one is fine.
Okay. Mr. Renshaw?
Really indifferent, but if I had to choose, option one.
Ms. Drummond, I'm sorry.
I'm also on option one, provided our creams match pretty well.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, we're not looking at custom colors, though. I mean, if you want a dead-on match, that could potentially be a custom color. So
no, but you know what I mean, like some.
Right. We're trying to do it within the manufacturer's standard color.
Right. So I guess my question is what the manufacturer provides as a standard color, is that a fairly good aesthetic match for the current brick that we have?
And we'll confirm that in the field. We did get a color chart from the manufacturer.
Okay. Thank you.
To confirm, is there no plan to put a canopy on this building then?
Well, that wasn't in our conversations originally. However, when I shared the information with the teachers at Eagleville, some of their input, and I believe, did you get that?
I did, I read that. Mm-hmm.
So part of some of their comments included putting a canopy there, which quite honestly, while we didn't think of that, I thought that was a good idea, given the fact that the way we line up for dismissal would be helpful. But again, that's something that I'm hoping that maybe we can have further conversation here with regards to whether or not she comes back with that on as part of the drawing and part of the cost associated with it.
Yeah, I guess my question would be whether or not this is the kind of thing that you would want to put the canopy on at the same time that you're doing the facade because of the way it integrates into the building. Would it be creating problems if you added it on at a later date?
Right. Ideally, you don't want to remove these panels once they're installed. So you want to make sure that the flashing, I imagine that the canopy will butt up to the face of the building, so we want to make sure that that flashing detail is done properly, and it would have to be done during construction.
Right.
May I ask a question about the canopy? I'm just curious, is it the intent that a canopy would extend a certain distance, maybe 8, 10, 12 feet from the doors, or are you looking to take it to the curb? Just out of curiosity.
Do you recall what was said in the document? I don't have it in front
It
of me.
didn't, actually. They definitely expressed the desire to have one, but there was no discussion about to what extent.
So when I met with the teachers, I had that discussion with them, whether it was, but I don't remember if the document reflected that, because they met as a bunch of teachers after I met with a smaller group. I did recommend that it would likely be much more challenging for us to put a canopy similar to that at Woodland. If you know how Woodland extends all the way out to the curb, but that a canopy not only would be aesthetically but also functionally appropriate. So I don't know how far might it go out if it doesn't go out to the curb. Would you recommend? I'm assuming that's based on some standards from manufacturers.
Well, it might actually be maybe really based more on the aesthetics of the building and really what the distance is from the curb to the door, and then it could be because you do have some recesses in the building and how wide it ends up being. So it'll be really more of a design aesthetic issue. And then, of course, if you have an idea of how many people.
As I'm looking at the drawing now, and I would say that if we would come all the way out to this portion here where the trash cans first meet and the grass starts to veer off.
Sure.
I don't know how far that is, but that would probably be the most reasonable.
Okay. We will look at that.
And then I guess regardless, then maybe moving the school name up to the top.
Right.
So canopy aside, I'm trying to understand the distinctions between option B and option D. I know that the property committee already recommended option D. But it's just an aesthetics distinction? Is that?
The difference between B and D is whether we go with more of a straight line between the metal and the brick.
Right, but there's no functionality difference.
Correct.
Okay. Well, I'm not on the property committee, so I don't get to weigh in on that one, but I don't know that I would have chosen that one. But I guess all of that aside, I would go with option 1 as well.
I will start by saying I would prefer option 1, but I would also say that in our discussions, I kind of had some questions regarding the asymmetrical look that this has, and I'm also seeing that the teachers are expressing concerns about the asymmetrical look. So I don't know if we want to discuss this further. I don't want to feel like the property committee has final say in what this should look like. I can't speak for everyone, but I'm open. I mean, it sounds like some people are leaning towards a more symmetrical look on this. So I don't know if we can open that discussion up again. But I would go for the cream-colored look with whatever.
Well, since we all agreed so easily, or almost all of us, I should say, I can't speak for the remaining board members down at the other end, but since we seem to be coming to a conclusion on the cream so easily, maybe we could, spend the extra time that we're getting here by arguing over what the aesthetics of it should be. But yeah, I was actually kind of surprised to hear that the property committee was okay with the asymmetrical.
Am I speaking out of turn? And
I think that was actually 2
D?
out of 3 individuals in that. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
I'd be interested also in seeing, could we get the straight line version in the cream and then the asymmetrical version in the cream?
Teachers did say straight line blue, just so you know. I know, to match their colors, but I like the straight line cream.
Mr. Ryan?
I don't know that you're going to get any kind of definitive answer leaving here today, but if I had my pick here is I would actually pick option B with the blue, so I guess I would agree with the teachers here. I firmly believe, though, that the asymmetrical look is not very appealing to the eye. So I'll hop on that boat there. But I do like the blue. My fear with the cream, actually, to be honest, I would do either. It doesn't really matter to me at this point. But my fear with the cream is if we're not doing a custom color match, which I'm sure would cost us more, the creams are going to look like different colors. And I think that once it's up there, it's going to look different. So having a contrasting color, I think, gets rid of that idea. So that's just my 2 cents.
Ms. Reese?
I don't even think we really talked about the asymmetrical aspect of this on Monday night. I think because we were looking at 4 very A, B, C, and D, I think we were narrowing it down from there. I think it's hard, and it's not a problem, but it looks like the teachers had both packets and we had both packets. So it's like we narrowed it down, so this shouldn't even have been around. But I don't care that it is. Does that make any sense? I honestly don't have any, as Brian said, I'm a little indifferent. I'm not invested in asymmetrical or straight line. Most people want a straight line, that's fine. I mean, I don't think we need to decide blue or cream now either, right now. We don't need to decide a color. I think we just need to decide on the design, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. And we can do some additional renderings if you would like to see that.
And, I mean, when we were at property committee, we were not provided a lot of time to look at this in advance. So I think that's also where the decision did kind of come from.
Not the wrong thing, but we need to come to a decision so they can make a design so it can go to bid, correct?
Right, but
And in order to make that decision, we don't need to make a color decision. I think we
Right.
need to make a design decision.
But what I heard was that we were looking at options 1, 2, 3, and 4, which the differentiating factor there is just the colors.
In property committee, we also did not have the side rendering and the rear rendering. So that's also what we were looking for in the design pictures.
Right, the direction that I thought that we had gotten here as a board was that we were looking for options 1 through 4. And so everyone was giving feedback on options 1 through 4, and the only difference in those drawings is the color. So if that's not what we need to be deciding right now, and we actually need to be giving input on the appearance and not the color, then I think maybe we need to restart this conversation. I mean, am I the only one that heard the direction that way?
No, I agree. I prefer option B then, and if that's the case, so.
Yeah, if I can jump in here for a minute. First, let me thank Mark for saving me over here and forwarding me these documents because the SharePoint site went down. I think the one thing that's missing in the renderings that we're looking at here is the full frontal view of the school. So I was over there this weekend looking at it. I think the one thing that doesn't come across well in these drawings is that on the right side of the school, to the right side of the entrance, there's a lot of variability in the height of the building. And then behind it, that white stripe that you see across the top of the building, that continues all the way around on a section of the building that's recessed from the very front edge of the elevation. So, I don't know, my thought, and maybe I guess I was the one who felt more strongly about the uneven design, is that it kind of takes some of those design characteristics and moves them over to the other side. I don't think the blue works in this case. I think it's probably, I think we need to find out what the cost of that custom color was, but in any case, they're going to wear at different rates and come across in different ways over time. So I think you just kind of would have to go with it. But I would be very hesitant to just go with the complete straight line across the entire left side of the building. I think it would be good maybe to see a full elevation, Teresa, if we can see it, maybe from further back, so that you can see what that recessed area looks like over by the music and the art rooms.
Yes. Yeah, we can do that. We can do that.
I will say, I'll add one more comment, because I know it was asked during the high school discussion too about the cost and whatnot of the brick versus the metal. The one consideration in this too, in terms of not going back with all brick, was the installation time that would be required for a full masonry facade.
That is true. The metal panel is less time to install.
Ultimately, I think it's a difficult choice here, because we're trying to match two very different styles on two different sides of this building, and I'm very concerned that what we have in any one of these cases is not a very good option regardless. I'll be honest, I'm worried about what the final look of this building is going to be.
So I'd like to make a recommendation then for how we proceed from here. I think that what we need is we need to get that full frontal view, as Mr. Navarrete said, so that we can really appreciate the irregularities of that other side of the building. And I think that we need to, maybe for next week, look at the options A through D in terms of, with color discussions aside, since that's not the decision that needs to be made right now. So rather than have us try to visualize something that we can't really see, and not all of us are going to be as familiar with what this building looks like as Mr. Navarrete, that would be my recommendation. I don't know how everyone else feels about that as a process forward.
And this is a collaborative effort. I mean, we are here to listen to you and to make this building what you would like it to be. So it's an iterative and collaborative process. So what you see on the page here won't necessarily be exactly what it looks like, because we have another, you have other input that we will incorporate.
I guess I'm also trying to be sensitive to the timelines here, because we only get one chance a month to vote on these things, and one chance to discuss. So I want to make sure that we're making the best use of our time.
Yeah, so with respects to the timeline, if we don't render a decision and give them direction at next week's meeting, we're likely going to be challenged with making our anticipated time frame in February, March of having this project in our hands with the numbers for good numbers for the bids. So that's one of the challenges here. So it's kind of a double-edged sword here. We don't want to certainly make a decision that we're not going to be pleased with long term, but we also know that by not making the decision, we are likely not going to make the February-March timeframe for the bids to come in on this project.
Well, and we have progressed. I mean, since there's 9, there's so many people involved. You say it's collaborative, and it's probably more difficult when it's collaborative, but we've kind of come far. I mean, with all the feedback, it looks like our next decision is the whole line, the asymmetrical versus clean line. So, I feel like we have gotten further along. So with a couple better renderings and maybe some choices of...
I guess what I'm looking at it is I feel like knowing that, to Mr. Navarrete's point, we're not really getting a full front view of the school, I'm wondering if we do, in fact, have enough information to narrow it down. Because given that, I mean, maybe the original design is something that we want to try to recreate, but I guess maybe that's not, I don't know. Is that even an option? I'm honestly having a little trouble following.
I think what I'm hearing is that when you look at options A through D, that no one is particularly that keen on the color blocking of option A, and no one seemed to mention option C. So I think we're between B and D. I think we're between the straight line and the variable line in the front. And I think we're all mostly leaning towards the cream or possibly blue. But my concern, so I would like to see more information with that, with the straight line, with the variable line, options B and D here. And to focus mostly on option one with the cream, that's mostly what I'm hearing, but my other concern is that I have not had a chance to review the feedback from the staff and the teachers, and I think that that is also really important to this decision-making. So not knowing what that says, I guess I would just charge the next meeting to include some of that, not even knowing what that is.
Okay,
So Kim, if I can make a
Go ahead, Ralph.
I was just going to make a suggestion. I think, one, if we can get kind of the elevations and look further back and see it both with the symmetrical line and with the unevenness, let's say in a cream color so that everything matches. I think look at it in cream and look at it in blue, right? And then I think there was discussion about a canopy option similar to the high school we had discussed. Do we want to include that in this or not?
I would say not at this point.
It would be my recommendation not to include the rendering of the canopy, only that the board would consider it in the future.
I'm fine with that. I just wanted to make sure that it was discussed before. I just want to make sure that Teresa has clear direction.
I would say not, but to make sure that your school name is high enough that for the future possible canopy.
And as I mentioned earlier too, the other part of this is the future installation of the MEP project and how we address those louvers. So with the metal, you can't just pull the metal off the wall to make modifications to those penetrations through the wall for the louvers. So we would need to detail this in such a way that these louvers can either be removed or and those openings blocked in, or if the louvers remain and then they're filled in from behind, so that even if the louvers are not truly functional, by the time they determine what the proper MEP system is, that the louvers would still exist. So that's another part of this evaluation.
And then I think that, so then the actual cost differential between the asymmetrical and the straight line. So based on what Mr. Navarrete said, with those items and the cost associated with that. Because I don't know how significant there will be a cost difference between the straight line or the asymmetrical, but there's likely some.
It'll be minimal, but yes.
Is that enough direction at this point?
Is that something you can get by next week?
We'll do our best.
Any other questions?
Wait, I'm going to clarify for 1 second what you were saying about the louvers. So are you saying that depending on which facade we have will dictate whether or not you can remove those louvers? I'm not following where that's a factor in the design at this time.
Well, our understanding from a recent meeting with the MEP engineer is that the louvers as they exist today, they're functional. But in the new proposed system, they would not necessarily be required. So the issue becomes that with whatever we do in the recladding system, that if it's a metal panel, because the metal panels, they interlock and they're sequential. So you can't pull that apart in order to modify the openings, say, for instance, if they come back and the louver is a different size or a different location, then if it's in the field of the metal panel on any part of the building, then you would potentially avoid the warranty on the metal panel system.
So either option, the line option or the asymmetrical option, will require engineering to address the louvers. Only that the asymmetrical option will have less engineering challenges in terms of its impact to the metal, because in the asymmetrical, some of the louvers are actually in the brick, which is likely easier to repair. So I think that we need to consult with Fidavia and with Mr. Fretz on what the best plan of action would be in either case, an asymmetrical panel or the line panel, and how we are going to address the issue, because that's going to be an issue either way. It's just how much.
Right.
Are there any other questions or any other directions that we need to give them? And in the meantime, I do ask the board members to please review the comments from the staff. If there's anything that you think in particular that I should be aware of that we ought to also have considered in their comments, send them to me by end of the day Thursday, and that way I can forward that on to the design professionals for consideration. Any other comments? If not, thank you, Teresa.
Okay,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you. Thank you, everybody.
That ends believe it or not, that ends the guests and scheduled speakers for this evening. And then next week, we have recognition of staff from Skyview, as well as we have Ms. Fields from the Home and School coming to do a presentation about all the wonderful work that our Home and School volunteers do for our students here in the district. With that, we'll then go into reports. We have, as you can see under the superintendent's report, there is a trip advisement as well as a personnel advisement for your review. Then we'll go on to fiscal items. Mr. Bricker.
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. For this session, we have the list of bills, the treasurer's report, budgetary transfers. There's 2 items under school police officer services. The first is to extend the existing contract from January 19th, 2020 to June 30th, 2020. The second is to extend the contract with U.S. Security Care of Bluebell from July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021, an additional cost of $1,550 from the current contract.
And just to comment on that, that contract will be posted to the agenda for the public to see. It is currently in the hands of the vendor, and we should have that within a day or two. So you do have a copy of that in my most recent communications with you.
Next will be the 2020 Master Plan project as presented tonight to approve Eastern Air Balance Corporation of Manheim, PA for the design phase, and approve Consexus of Middletown, PA proposal for Master Systems Integration Services. Next item would be a discussion on the per capita tax.
You want to go into that?
Sure. So as the board already voted to eliminate the per capita tax ongoing, there's also past due or historically past due per capita taxes that Berkheimer is currently collecting on behalf of the school district. In reviewing this information, it's our recommendation that we look to have a 1-year extension of the current contract to collect the most recent 5 years of past due taxes. This will limit the amount that we're spending on the collections to what is realistically collectible, and eliminating some of the significantly older tax years, and allow us to collect the ongoing taxes that are coming in from this year that may become delinquent.
So just so the board understands the options before you, you either decide that we, in essence, either write off all the past due by not taking the administrative recommendation, or what we're asking you to do is write off all the past due delinquents with the exception of the past 5 years. Or you can make any other variation between there, but that's our recommendation is what Mr. Bricker has shared. We shared that with the Finance Committee, and we wanted to bring it to the board for discussion. So before we go on to other items, let's just talk about that. Mr. Ryan?
What are the dollar amounts that we're talking about, Tim? What's the total outstanding, and then what's the bucket in the most recent 5 years?
So in the most recent 5 years, you're looking at $26,000 for 2018, 18 taxes, and then it's about 16,000 for the 4 years thereafter. Each of the 4 years thereafter, sorry. If you look at the trend that goes past that, after the 5 years, there's very little, if any, collections that are created, and based on, Mr. Earnshaw's review of the cost, it would just be, you'd be wasting money trying to collect past due amounts that far back.
Any other questions? Any other questions, Mr. Earnshaw?
Yeah, so you're saying 16,000 for 4 years, it's what, 64,000, and then 28, so you're looking about 90,000?
It's about, it's around
92-ish.
80, 90,000.
That's for the past 5 years. So if you go back beyond that, what are you talking about?
It's like $234,000.
Okay.
But that goes back
What
significant
does-
years.
Help me understand, does Berkheimer do anything to collect these? Like, they sent a bill out this past July. It's due August 31st with a discount, or I forget what date by the... Do they do anything after the fact?
They do the mailings and they do calls, but in talking with them regarding the collection efforts associated with that, the cost to actually lien a property or seek a judgment becomes cost ineffective, because you're going to be spending more on seeking that judgment or that lien than the actual outstanding taxes.
So if we tell them to go after the most recent 5 years, what will they do?
They will do the mailings and the phone calls, as it was explained to me.
And then they'll charge the district, or is that, have they already?
Well, we get charged 75 cents for each mailing that goes out, and then the postage associated with that.
So if we get nothing back, we're just going to be incurring costs for nothing, because chances are you have a hard time finding people, I would guess.
In reality,
You're going to get a lot of return to senders, especially if you go back more than 5 years.
Just a question, how many delinquents actually come in any given year?
I don't really have a historical trend from Berkheimer. I can ask them for that. But when you look at the trend for the last 5 years, you're going to look at something like $20,000, $30,000 that will trickle into from this year to be past due. Then it's going to drop down to about 17, 18,000, then 16,000. It'll stay flat for about a couple of years, and then it drops down and just stays flat after that. Like, you're really not going to get much. The real thing I would want to keep this in place for would be to collect the current year's taxes and this year's taxes that are past due.
Okay. And does the district currently have any sort of receivable for these uncollected amounts on the balance sheet?
We do not.
Okay, so there's nothing to be written off, that anything that you collect is just goes
Only
into
if
the
we
current
get it.
year? Okay. All right. So, I mean, it's just another reason why it was the right thing to do, get rid of this thing. You realize that, don't you?
Yeah, we know.
Okay, thank you. I mean, my concern is collectability, even if you go back 3 to 5 years. I don't know what you're going to get. You might just be throwing money down.
And you're exactly right, so we don't know, there's no certainty in that, so we actually might be spending money to get nothing.
Right.
And we're putting this in for 1 year only. And if we want to extend it after that year, we can, or we can just end it.
Maybe try like I mean, we're still pretty early in the collection cycle for, I guess this doesn't include what just got billed in 2019, right?
It does not.
Okay. So maybe try 2018 and see what the results are?
Well, they're currently working them now.
They are working on those
Yes.
now? Okay. All right. It's kind of hard to, then I'm trying to get a sense, can we do something like a pilot or a test to see if we put some effort into it, we're going to get anything back?
So this past...
Do a small sampling, like, don't mail the entire population.
Well,
mail
I
a
think if they're in this
subset of
business,
it.
we should be able to ask them what's their experience been, and we should be able to get that, you typically get X% on that return.
So in talking with them, 5 years is typically what most school districts and municipalities do. They do not, most of them already have a process in place with Berkheimer to eliminate that. That's never been put in place for Methacton School District. So that's kind of the first piece. Last year, we got roughly, I'd have to verify it, somewhere between $35,000 and $50,000 worth of past due per capita tax.
And that's with incurring some cost to get that, or that just
Yes.
came by?
That's incurring costs, yes.
Okay.
And do we know how many taxpayers, like, so we have a sense of how many letters approximately would be going out?
I think I do have that.
Because we're looking at over $1 a letter. I'm sure they're not paying the 50 cents on postage, but it's got to be more than 25 cents, so over $1 per letter for how many letters? And then as a piggyback on that, I would also want to know how many letters they're sending out.
It looks like close to 3,000.
So 3,000 letters. Is that 3,000 taxpayers?
Each letter would be a taxpayer, yes. They each have to
Right,
get
so
their-
then how many letters per year do they send out as part of their
Well, I
collection?
don't know how many are duplicates, because it could be one letter for 5 years worth of stuff, so I really don't know how many duplicates.
Right.
I can get significant information from them on how many it would be. Again, it's not the past dues that I'm so much worried about that are.
Right,
that-
no, I get you.
I'm looking at
You're
what's going
looking
to roll
at-
from this year.
You're
which
looking
could
at
be-
that 28,000 number and not the 16,000 number.
Correct.
And, yeah, no, I get where you're coming from. I'm just trying to figure out how much money are we throwing at trying to collect.
If each was an individual, I think I estimated about $8,000.
So $8,000 to try to get $16,000, so we would net $8,000. So, yeah, I think I'm seeing the wisdom of Brian and his
And I
plan here.
assume that they're going to go after not only the district's revenue, but the townships as well?
That is correct.
You know where I'm
And
going
is-
next, right?
And is the township paying any of this dollar plus per letter?
Not at
Mr.
this
Earnshaw?
point.
No.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of what I figured. All right.
So I'm trying to get some direction, because if we need a specific motion to, as an example, to just eliminate the past debt, I would seek input from the solicitor to make sure that it's compliant with the law associated with it. So do we think that we're looking to eliminate all the past debt, or take the recommendation towards collecting the last 5 years? Any thoughts?
I'm thinking it's somewhere in between. I can't see spending $8,000 to get 8,000 more. It just seems kind of ridiculous, but Brian, what were you recommending, 2018?
How about we say up to the last 5 years, you start with the most recent years and see where you hit the point of diminishing returns, and just cut it off when you're spending $1 to get $1.
Looks like a complicated motion.
No, just the motion is just up to the next 5 years, and then you make the judgment of how far do you go.
So we would be authorizing Mr. Bricker to use his discretion as to how far he goes?
Yeah, but don't go beyond 5 years.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm comfortable with that. I just want to make sure that it's okay for us to word it that way, that.
Well, what we would likely word is that well, Mr. Navarette, you have your hand up?
Yeah, when I look at the list of the overdue taxes, we've got a pretty linear and static number from 2014, 15, 16, 17, all in the range of $14,000 to $16,000. So realistically, from 2018, what are we going to collect? Another $13,000? I would even limit it to just collecting 2018. Get that 13 grand for, you figure that's what, $15 per taxpayer. I would just limit it to the last year, at 2018, 2019, and move on.
I would say to not go beyond 5 years, but I think it doesn't sound like we have a lot of data from Berkheimer, historical data. I would say if you can be provided with historical data that would show you that there is some sort of sense of, that this is not a break-even exercise here, to go pursue it, but otherwise,
I would say maybe a compromise would be the last 3 years.
Okay.
And that way you're not going too far in, you're not going too far out. But to limit it to the current year, then all I would do is wait. I wouldn't pay, I'd just sit there and wait.
I agree with Tim's recommendation, the last 3 years.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Continue, Mr. Bricker.
The next item on the agenda is the student club and activity account, is to establish the philanthropy club and a student activity account for the philanthropy club in accordance with District Board Policy 618. And then the last two would be the high school main entrance facade repair and the Eagleville facade design concept.
So we'll word those agenda items appropriately based on the discussion here that we had this evening and be able to fill in the blanks once any further decisions are made at the next Tuesday's meeting. Any questions for Mr. Bricker?
I have a question about the school resource officer services. Is there an evaluation done of the school resource officers, a written evaluation in any case? Thank you.
The company does the evaluations on an annual basis.
Okay, but they're not evaluated by, like, within the school in which they serve?
We don't provide a direct evaluation of third-party employees, but certainly we provide input to the management company about our preferences and our concerns and or likes in terms of their performance. So we don't directly get involved in their performance evaluation, but we certainly have communications with regards to the work that they do for our students. And we're very pleased with the 2 armed police officers.
I will just say, just to add to that, is I'm constantly picking up at our COLA after hours and constantly dropping off and picking up at this high school after hours, and I'm very, very impressed with their visibility. I am continually trying not to park in their way because they are there and very visible. And just from just a community member, parent, so I know I'm pleased from that aspect of it, and that's just an informal observation that I wanted to make since you brought it up, Liz.
No, I guess I'm in agreement with that also, and but I guess just looking at if there are officers who in the future are not as satisfactory, is there what kind of mechanism?
Yes, we have a mechanism to deal with that, and we've done that in the past with them.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
But not with these 2 current officers.
No, I agree. Yeah. I agree with that. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Bricker? Mr. Ryan?
Yeah, just a quick question in terms of the student club and activity account. I know it says the operation of this club is contingent on the annual grant from the Methacton Education Foundation, but in the personnel items that we have for both items number 9 and 10, there's co-sponsors that don't have that condition in here. So does that need to be added to that section as well? I don't want to award a supplemental contract now with no contingency if there's the contingency that it might not even operate. How does that work? It's kind of a dual question here.
My only follow-up question would be, would they still be doing work as part of that club with the students, even if they didn't receive that donation? So I would have to check on that as well.
No. The answer would be that we can either put the clarification on to the motion for the 2 individuals, but if the club doesn't exist, there is no contract for them to provide those services that don't exist.
And that's just what I'm trying to make sure that we avoid, that we're not agreeing to pay this and then the club doesn't exist, but we only have the condition on one of the 2.
Yeah, I think that's what we'll do. So make note that on those 2 supplemental contracts, it'll be conditioned. So just so everybody is clear on this, the Phoenixville Hospital Foundation provides grants in the neighborhood of about $8,000, and the Education Foundation has been a recipient of that grant for the last, I believe, 4 years. And in order to make sure that activities across the district are provided within our system appropriately, we've restructured the way this grant has been provided to the district, so that it's run as any other club would run, and the employees associated with it are compensated, at the same level associated with any other club sponsor. So this whole agenda item and the 2 people associated are as a result of us cleaning up that one last club that really needed to get cleaned up. And with that, it allows us to kind of move forward, knowing that if that grant continues, we'll continue with the club. And if the grant doesn't come, it may be a matter of the board deciding in the future, but it certainly allows us not to run the club if in fact that grant isn't received. So we should see an agenda item for that. I'm aware that the foundation did accept the grant and that they're going to be issuing the grant to us. But it may not be on the agenda here just yet.
One follow-up question. Does the grant cover the cost of the supplemental contracts, or the supplemental contracts, the contribution?
Yes, all the costs associated with the operation of that program, including the activities of the students and the supplemental contracts, are covered by the grant. Any other questions for Mr. Bricker? If not, let's move on to the next area under personnel. Mr. Regina.
We have a number of items for the board's consideration this evening. First item is an employment contract for the Director of Business Services for Timothy Bricker. It's a contract renewal. The second item is...
I'll just make a comment on that. So that'll be filled in, and we'll have the contract posted before the agenda goes live for the public this week.
Thank you, Dr. Serby. Next item is a classified resignation. This is a retirement. Item C, we have 4 employment of classified positions. 3 of those are replacement positions. 1 is a new position. We have 2 professional uncompensated leaves. Both are FMLA. We have 1 classified uncompensated leave. We have 1 sabbatical leave. This is an extension of a current sabbatical leave that's taking place in the fall semester. We have 11 supplemental contracts. Again, following up with much of what we've been doing, communicating each one of the supplemental contracts. We have 3 additional activity sponsors you had previously approved for service contracts. Some of that is reworking what we currently had in our activity sponsorship, eliminating some of those clubs and then consolidating them into 3 service contracts. We have contracts for curriculum writing and mentors. Those are updated. The IEP, GIEP writing from the past summer. You would notice that there is a change from what you had we originally posted of about $3,000 from this weekend, and a lot of that was what we had originally budgeted, and there is an additional cost of about $3,000 due to increased IEPs over the summer, whether it be new students moving into the district or new students at the kindergarten level. We have extended fall coaching season pay, an assistant wrestling coach position, philanthropy club co-sponsors, which we will look at creating the contingency on those positions, and the assistance with library inventory at the Worcester Elementary School. We have 1 volunteer item for the volunteer list and 3 community ed items, all lifeguard swim instructors. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Regina? Start down with Mr. Navarrete. Any questions, sir? No? Anyone to my right? How about to my left? Mr. Winters?
Yeah, I'll ask some generic questions. If a particular individual is already receiving a supplemental contract for some type of service they're providing, how do we ensure that if they take an additional role during that time, that they're servicing both roles in the proper way.
It's a very generic question. So we would do just a reevaluation of what the services that are being provided by that individual. I recognize, I don't want to go too deep.
So on the same type of questions, the years of service that is in the point system is related to the years of service in that supplemental contract, not their years of service in the school district. Is that correct?
Yes, but the years of service goes towards any activity years of service that they may have had.
What he means by that is if you say you were a club advisor for 2 years, you're doing the chess club, and then you decide you want to become a football coach. Well, those 2 years as a chess advisor count towards your years of experience as a football coach or whatever I just said.
That I'm glad I didn't have supper. That's crazy. Also, how do we, I know we have a point system, but I'm looking, I'll be direct on item 8 here. I'm looking at the amount associated with that, and I'm looking at a couple of contracts in neighboring districts for supplemental contract. And one, the head wrestling coach was receiving less than this amount. Another district, the assistant coach is making about half as this amount. So I'm just curious, it's all related to our contractual requirements that we've agreed to in the point system, I assume?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
My question is with the number 5, when you look at the list of mentors, I know it's contractual what they get. Is that the total amount of, I think they get paid $900 to be a mentor? Is that the total amount, this entire, why are we seeing it now? Is that for the year, or is this are there more mentors coming our way?
Some are for new employees, some are for individuals that are coming in as long-term substitutes at this point due to leaves.
Any other questions for Mr. Regina?
A couple things. Can you explain again to me, like items 1, 2, 3 of supplemental contracts, what service group 1, 2, and 3 are? I didn't quite understand what that is.
I don't have that in front of me, but it's, Dr. Zerbe, you may know that better than I.
There is a club called the Service Group Club. And within the Service Group Club, they were collapsed at the high school this past year so that we could, A, provide more opportunities for students, B, reduce the number of sponsors associated with the similar service clubs, and 3, get a handle on some of the community asks that are associated with service clubs. So to give you an idea, they consolidated all the service clubs, so those that go out and provide either support for students in need, support for families, other the things that the Kiwanis work towards, what Rotary work towards. So there's sub-student groups for those types of things. So they're all organized into this one service group club, and then there's several sponsors to manage multiple service groups to provide leadership opportunities for students. So it's
various needs of community service within.
Exactly. And
Okay.
it has reduced the number of
So it's a club
sponsors
to provide
required.
communities. Okay,
Yeah.
I got it, okay. And then can you get a list of, we've approved, there's been on the agenda a number of instances of supplemental contracts for curriculum writing. I think mentors have come up a couple times. Can you provide a complete, comprehensive list totaling how much that has been? I don't need it for now, but if you could get that, that would be helpful. And then that was it. Okay, thanks.
I just want to clarify, just for the curriculum writing?
Curriculum, right, I think mentors have come, just some of these
mentors, I'm
things
sorry.
that have been on the agenda, either current or retroactive, a number of times. And then I guess the IEP, GIEP has come up several times as well, just so an understanding of how much is being spent in total for those 3 items.
Okay. And besides totals, do you want the number of bodies and the number of dollars? Or do you want the names with it as well?
I guess maybe the number of people, because like the mentors, I don't know how many there are. There seems like there's quite a few, and I don't know if we have that many, if it's
New
designed for
teach-
first-year teachers, and then, I don't know what
And
else.
and long-term subs.
And long-term subs, okay.
Okay.
I'm just because with the contract, the one thing I think which would be helpful for conceptualizing, like on Article 45, there are specifics exactly have to be said. So subject area coordinators, there's math, science, ILA, social studies, health, it's written out there already. So I feel like we see it trickled in, but it's specific to things that we have to do contractually. So it's not things that we add in. I think it's just coming to us trickled. But really, it's all stated of what has to be provided on the contract.
I understand that, but we've seen, for example, curriculum writing, I think it's shown up on 3, if not 4 agendas.
Yeah, curriculum
So
is
I'm trying to get a sense of how much is the district spending in total on curriculum writing, for example?
Fair question. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Regina? If not, we're going to move on to the next matter of business, and that is curriculum and programs. There's no items there. Under policy, the policy committee had to reschedule the policy meeting, so that will be, I believe, tomorrow evening. And likely there'll be some first reads for the board to see at next Tuesday's meeting. And there's several policies, 12 in fact, for your approval next month or next week. On the agenda under other, there's some gifts and donations as listed, as well as trips as listed on the agenda. And then before we go on the dates for board members' calendars, any questions on the policy or other area? If there are no questions in there, I'll turn it over to the board president.
All right, so we have our dates for board members' calendars. Please note that the reorganization meeting is on December 2nd, which is a Monday. For a board that usually meets on Tuesdays, I figure it's worth reminding everybody. It's a Monday for that one. Is there anything for old business or new business to discuss this evening?
Nothing to discuss. I just want to mention that clock is wrong, and I know it's not a big deal, but I keep looking at it, and it's stressing me out. So if we could get that fixed before next week, I'd really appreciate it.
Mr. Fretz, I think you can put that on your to-do list. Anything else for new business, old business? Mr. Ryan?
2 items, both old business here. I had sent a follow-up email regarding 2 items to the superintendent. The first was a letter had been sent to Mr. Bartle and Mr. Iannozzi regarding the Shenandoah tax. Without getting into details, I'm just curious, did we receive a response from them by the deadline?
I received a phone call from them actually this evening, and they are planning to have a response to us very soon.
Okay. Just as a note for those that are following their deadlines and things, the deadline was Friday with the 3-question response, so we did not receive the response there. The second is in regards to something that I brought up in September in regards to the Audubon property. I had mentioned the idea of having a formalized process and what we're going to do moving forward. It seems like the clock just keeps ticking, and we're not really doing anything about it. So I had sent an email to Dr. Zerbe requesting, based off of the meeting in September, there did not seem to be any objections from board members as to this process idea and creating this process. So I had said if we could have something on the agenda for next week, whether it be a presentation or just some type of motion that would establish what this process would look like, what the timeline would look like, how these ideas would be evaluated. Before, we had only heard something from the township. Now we know that there's at least another person in regards to the Riverbend who came and spoke. There was an email that the board received from the Methacton Community Theater. I think this would be helpful, especially as we're getting into budgeting season. I won't be here anymore, but knowing the future of that building and what we're going to do with it, I think will be helpful to start that process now. So a little bit of feedback from the board. Again, I don't know if that's needed since we got it the last time, but is this something that the board would like to do? Is this a process that we need to formalize? Do we need an official vote to get this process moving? Just sitting here and having that building just sit there as well seems to be counterintuitive to what we're trying to do.
I would encourage any other board members who share the sentiment to speak up or contribute to the conversation here.
I would support a dialogue next week.
I agree. I would also like to see us move forward on something. I mean, someone came to us with ideas, and we had talked about advertising the opportunity in the building further. So I don't know if the next step is to talk about it, is to do advertising, or to get more information from Riverbend. But I do feel like we've kind of stagnated here, so I would like to see something done.
Agreed. Mr. Navarrete?
Yeah, I think maybe the first step should be for maybe we can have an information session, and maybe Kim and I can inform the rest of the board as to what the discussions were with the township and where that discussion went, because I think one of the primary objectives that we have in leasing out this space is to ensure that the space remains habitable. From what I've seen, none of the other organizations besides the township that have come forward have the means necessary to do the necessary repairs to that building. We have a willing donor that's working with the township to provide meaningful repairs to the building, to make it a habitable space that could service the entire community. I think maybe we just need to inform the rest of the board as to where that sits, at least as far as the specifics, in a purely information session, and then we can maybe debate it in public.
Now, I would support an agenda item for discussion as to maybe, and I don't know that putting it on for next week's meeting is too soon. I don't know. But I think that there's further information that's become available that I think that we need to include in our discussion, such as the possibility of the development of the Fatlands estate in Audubon, that, you know, if there's talk of putting more housing in that area, then we have to really seriously consider what the long-term plans are for our elementary schools. So that's still very, very early in the process, but just the idea being floated out there means that we have to be looking at that as well. So I would support putting it on an agenda for discussion, but I don't know that, I don't want to put it on for next week and have it be a not thorough, not comprehensive discussion. So
Purely selfish reasons, obviously. This has been something that I've just been trying to push, and the fear is that if we don't put a date on this, and some board members switch over, and then it becomes the second, third, fourth, fifth thing that we're talking about, then nothing happens. So I was just trying to get a concrete deadline. That's why I brought it up months ago with the hope of, okay, this wasn't a, hey, 1 week turnaround. This was, you have a month, you have 2 months, nothing's happened again. So I was just trying to continue that dialogue to get an official something done. So I understand that the will of the board is to have more information and take more time.
So it just means that you have to pay attention to the agendas, and you can still participate in the discussion, but you'll only get 4 minutes and you'll be over there.
Got it.
Okay.
Can I just add to Mike's suggestion and ask, have we spoken to Riverbend again? Like, they just came, do we know that we've spoken to them?
Yeah, I have reached out to Erin McCool, and we have a conversation started just to get a little bit more information beyond, and so that she knows that, you know, we're not dismissing her.
And so we know the township's a viable option. I don't know if Riverbend is or isn't. Is there a way, without it being a big agenda item, to figure out whether it's someone from the administration to just figure out how we go about, I don't know if advertising is the right word, but kind of a last-ditch effort? Is there anyone else interested in this property? I don't know if that's something Amanda can do. I don't know when we do discuss so that we can move forward.
Yeah, but that's why I think that we have to have a full conversation about the property in general. Are we looking at selling it? Are we looking at leasing it? It's all of those things. So, yeah, I think that we have to have a full conversation.
Can we not get a summary of what the township was thinking and those discussions were next week? And kind of get a sense of whether it's viable or not? I mean, one of the concerns I expressed is, well, it would benefit the entire district, the residents of the entire district, namely being Worcester. And also, I'd like to get an understanding of what other parties might be involved, because I do have a concern from what I have heard. And I don't know if it's factual or not. I'd like to get confirmation of that. And then just whether or not, from an overall facilities plan, whether this building's ever going to be needed as a school again in the district, given capacity in other buildings. I mean, those are all, I think, key considerations that have to go into, any kind of decision or where we go down the road.
I think I can try to address some of that next week. Maybe Mr. Navarrete and I can confer between now and then so that we can make sure that we have answers, but I think that's doable.
Just kind of looking for just kind of broad strokes, not the detail of what a contract might look like, but just kind of what the thinking is.
Yeah. Is there anything else for old or new business? Mr. Earnshaw.
Just two things, and it comes from the last Finance Committee meeting that I was unable to attend, and it's namely the budget surplus from the last fiscal year. And I mean, now that we have the audit report, we've heard from the auditors, what's the expected timing on kind of some of the details around where that surplus generated from? Because I know you're quickly moving into the budget process for next year, and I think it's going to be very important to understand those, what drove those variances so they can be factored into next year's budget.
So I currently have the budget review completed. I have to review it with Dr. Zerby and go over that. And for your enjoyment, I also have a forecast that's just about completed.
Is that my going away present?
That is your going away present.
So next week's meeting could be a agenda item?
Depends on how far I can get in the review with Dr. Zerby.
We should have it to you, we'll have it to you as soon as we possibly can. I think at the Finance Committee meeting, we provided the high-level piece, and I don't know if you got a hold of that.
Yeah, it was a page of numbers. It wasn't really any explanations.
Well, no, you're right, it wasn't an explanation, it just showed where the variances were to
But it didn't tell me anything about why.
Understood.
There were discussions in the Finance Committee about some of the major areas that contributed to those, but
right, and I saw that in your memo,
try to capture as much as possible.
kind of really
it was all high level.
High level. So,
yeah, I think part of that discussion was that we needed a lot more detail in a pretty short order.
And then the second piece, I saw the document you reviewed at the committee meeting about the initial budget expectations. And really just two main questions I have from here, from the information provided, was I'm not sure where that debt service number is coming from at 11 million. When I look at the audit report, I see about 10 million in total when I include the leases. That is assumed incremental borrowing in there or something?
There is the future borrowings that would be impacted associated with that, as well as that we're getting ready to close on.
But does that include the next round of the master plan? Is there any Arrowhead money in there, or?
There's no Arrowhead money.
Okay.
When we did that, what we did for the $11 million, we kept that flat to this year's budget. That is the amount that we budgeted for property, debt service, interest, and debt service. Principal included in that is the leases and also the escrow payment, and any other pieces that go under that, like the 700 series would be any new equipment that's purchased and leased or capitalized.
Okay, so that falls into that debt number. It's not purely interest and principal payments.
It is not strictly the bond money. It is other items.
And then I think you ought to take a look at the assumption regarding holding operational expenses flat. I mean, you got to put some sort of inflationary factor in there at least, I think. Because right now you got roughly $24 million expenses that aren't growing next year.
You know, we certainly only wanted to provide this as a point of reference to, again, have the conversation as we did probably the previous month about in preparation for the budget this coming year, and our recommendation to, based on those numbers and our previous conversation, to come forward with the understanding that the proposed preliminary budget for 2021 is likely going to require us proposing the taking of the Act 1 exceptions. With again, that's only as a part of the proposed preliminary process. That does not necessarily mean that that is where we would land on the matter. But it was trying to prevent, or as I was trying to provide a guidance of without providing increases to the MEA as part of that, what that impact on any MEA, our largest employee base, would have on the budget.
Okay, I got it. And I did see the sensitivities you ran at the bottom part of the schedule, which really factor that in. So I'm just saying that from an operational expense standpoint, you don't want to paint, when you're doing this kind of look, I wouldn't paint too rosy of a picture with holding operational expenses flat like that.
It certainly makes sense. We were just trying to, keep a flat, just an understanding that, these are things we need to consider. As you know, and when we actually do the budget, and we do factor in those increased costs and percentages in our overall budget review.
Yeah, I forget which conversations we've had in which meetings now, but did we talk in this meeting with the full board about the amended timeline for the budget? We're going to get a look in December as opposed to January, and how that's going to work. You want to go over that? Because I think that colors the discussion as to why we got such a very, very high level overview from Tim right now.
You pulling it up, Mr. Bricker? Because I think that's critical. So Mr. Bricker is going to fill you in on some of the details, but generally speaking, as a result of the presidential primary election, the Act 1 legislation, or Act 1 law, requires that in that year for which there is a presidential primary, that the election or the Act 1 process be moved up approximately 1 month. So our goal for the board is to, by December 20th, provide you a document to prepare you for the conversation, likely on January 7th, as a special meeting immediately following the work session for that month. Now, that has not been decided by the board because you set that schedule, but as of right now, in order for us to make the Act 1 timeline and be as consistent with the days that we meet, and so that we don't meet 4 times in January, that is currently the recommendation that I shared with the board president and vice president. But certainly you'll make that decision as part of the reorg meeting on December 2nd. And my hope is that I think we finalized the schedule to share with you shortly. So you'll be able to see what those schedules and what some potential conflicts are there. So Mr. Bricker, I think what happens in January 7th, if that's the date, what do we decide at that moment?
So on January 7th, the full board will review the draft proposed preliminary budget. At that point in time, the board's got to make a decision to either adopt the resolution not to increase the taxes above the Act 1 index, or to take the exceptions. If we choose to adopt the resolution, that needs to be to PDE by January 9th. That's why we have the 7th in there. If we go above it, the next one would be on January 21st, which is to adopt the preliminary budget. And then that would then be uploaded to PDE after it sits. The next key dates for the board members would be the May 19th We'd have a special meeting to adopt the proposed final budget and advertise final adoption date. That's got to sit for 30 days. We'll have a final review with the Finance Committee on the 16th of June, and then a special meeting prior to, we'll do the June 23rd. There'll be a special meeting ahead of the board meeting to adopt the board.
That, I know, no, it would just be a regular voting meeting.
Oh, is it just a regular?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so it's not a
That's
special
okay,
meeting,
right.
it's a regular voting meeting to adopt the budget.
The budget.
That does give the tax collectors the 7 days that they're requesting and allows us to have the budget sit for the 30-day requirement.
So in addition to that, Mr. Navarrete, if you recall, in two meetings, the Finance Committee had agreed with our recommendation to come forward with taking the exceptions to allow for the board to work with the administration to move that budget over the next several months to what's reasonably acceptable for the operation of the school district. Knowing that likely our expenses are going to, as indicated by just being eligible for the exceptions, especially about, I believe it's about $700,000 for special ed, that our special education expenses have been rising over the last 2 years. And so that's being eligible now for the exception is a clear indication of us paying for those costs and now being eligible to recoup those costs under an increased tax if we so choose to.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, you said it several times, but I want to, eligible for taking the exceptions. I think, Tim, you said something about raising the taxes above the Act 1. It's just giving us the flexibility in the budgeting process that if we need to go above the Act 1 index, we have the flexibility. If we choose not to do that, I just want to make sure we're clear with the audience here. If we choose not to do that, we can choose to go below the Act 1. But if we choose not to take the exceptions at this point, we box ourselves in and have no flexibility on using those potential revenue sources. So I just want to make sure that it's clear, because somebody's going to say that we agreed to go above the Act 1 index today or next week or whenever this would come about. And it's not, it's the flexibility that we're looking for.
That's the proper word, flexibility. That's exactly what it allows us to do. We've done this in a number of prior years, so this is nothing unusual. And many school boards started in their budgeting process this way, to allow maximum flexibility, as you indicated, so that we can ensure that we're providing for all the needs of the school district.
Anyone else for old or new business? All right. At this point, we will open it up to courtesy of the floor. Mr. Andrews.
Good evening. John Andrews, Lower Providence. Option C revised. All of our students are a larger group to educate by definition than just those at one school, Arrowhead. Back in January, Dr. Zerbe presented various building options and a recommendation to keep an Arrowhead presence that you jumped on. His option C, return to K-5 and 6 to 8 without Arrowhead and with Skyview as a K-5. It had functional capacity error and overall was cursory. I have brought this to your attention repeatedly. I'm not sure you listened. It's probably politics or an indication that any constructive facts and reason do not come from stooges. In the interim, there's very little dialogue, yet much has changed. Renovation costs jumped, replacement costs exploded, enrollment growth projections have softened. Why, along with fewer births, seniors are choosing to live longer in their homes. The MEA salary schedule has not been fixed, and the next contract won't be cheap. Your architect appears to push an openness layout, whereas that may be the opposite of what people have liked about Arrowhead. Survey comments covered a wide range of ideas, not total love for a new Arrowhead. You voted for new building design seemingly in a hurry, ahead of the posted schedule and without a contract. You want full-day kindergarten at the same time as the new Arrowhead. Have you forgotten the limits of the Act 1 index? Our high school rank has dropped from 11 to 59 in 5 years, and that's supported by new Keystone literature results for this year. Will a new Arrowhead or full-day kindergarten fix that? Your debt analysis by PFM shows budget problems of any spending spree on top of needed renovation costs. A hoped-for Shenandoah outcome may cost more than the escrowed amount. Study of various grade structures show option C results in better educational outcomes and rankings than what you have now. And K-4 enrollment is the smallest since 1995, with the exception of T1. The correct option C functional capacity for K-8 is 3832, not 3570. This would include 2 rooms added at Woodland, as the building was designed to allow. Utilization will be below 90% for that period through 2028, with 500 spare seats. Why incur $50 million of principal and interest? Also, I recommended a parallel independent study of option C. It was met with silence. Please reconsider and soon. It's good to have options on entire buildings, not just facades. And Mr. Ryan, come the new year, you're welcome to be stooge number 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Mr. Bickelman?
Joe Bickelman from Audubon. I can count probably on these 2 fingers how many school board directors came back to future meetings, that weren't on the board anymore. Republicans, Democrats, everybody that was so concerned about the students. They're not here. They never come back. If they're so dedicated to the students to run on the school board, how come they're not here? I can't figure that one out. That's just something I observed coming to every meeting for the last 5 years with Dr. Malik and Mr. Andrews. They just don't come back. I don't know what it is. Politics? I don't know. Kids? Concern for kids? I don't know. They're just not here. The philanthropy club. I don't know if I missed it, but what is the mission of that club? Where will the disbursements be going? The kids that will be officers at the school, the president, there will be a student that's a president and a treasurer and a secretary and a vice president. They'll be deciding where the funds go. Does anybody know where the funds are going? What's the mission statement of the club? They have to have a mission statement. Does anybody know? We're going to be paying $2,400 in teacher salaries. You need to add another 20% on that for retirement and Social Security costs. So you'll be spending $2,900 to operate the club. That's 36% of the $8,000 that's coming in. I don't know if their budget has other revenue sources. Does it? Will they be fundraising? I mean, you're going to pass on this, so I think you should know things like this. Do they have projected other revenue sources besides the $8,000 that comes from the hospital to the foundation to the kids? I just want to know what the mission statement is and where the disbursement's going. Does anybody know what you're going to pass on next Tuesday? I heard the thing about the chess club experience. If a teacher has experience in the chess club for 2 years, that 2 years experience in the chess club would be attributable and associated with if he would decide to be a football coach. That just doesn't make sense. You should note that in your contract. inside the pages, inside the margins to address that issue. Because if a teacher was smart, they would work the chess club up to the last 3 years before they retire, and then transfer to a higher valued position, like the football team or something like that, and they can raise their highest average 3-year salary, which would increase their pension until they die. So if the teachers, think a little bit, they can do that. Kind of like when the superintendents become superintendent of record at the tech school and they get paid for that. It's usually right before they retire, a lot of them. You can see that. The contract with the bus drivers and First Student was settled. They gave a $1 increase to drivers for the first year up to like if you were making $25 an hour. My wife got a 2.25% raise. She got 65 cents for her 25 years experience. The other drivers lower than $25 got raises of 4% to 5.2% for that $1. Okay? Just to let you know that.
Thank you, Mr. Bickelman. Dr. Malik?
Jim Malik, Worcester. You guys are talking about flexibility when it comes to your Act 1 index. I mean, I get it, but to me, you're talking about flexibility to spend more money. And anytime a governmental agency gets the ability to spend more money, it's quite scary to me. So I would just keep that in mind. Mr. Bickelman talked about why people aren't coming back to these meetings. I guess he was talking about former board members. Well, the reason they don't is they all had kids here in the district who graduated. So when the kids graduate, the board members go bye-bye. Watch what happens with these folks. They'll be here until their kids graduate and then go bye-bye. Yeah. The agenda that you have here said that you're going to have a contract for the school resource officer. Is that right? That we're going to actually see a contract? The board's going to see a contract? Did I get that right? And we're going to see one from Mr. Bricker. Now, how does that work exactly? When do you determine that you're going to let the public see contracts, you're going to let the board see contracts for like a couple, $100,000 here, $100,000 there, but then you have KCBA Architects, $1.8 million, and you guys don't get to see the contract. How does that work exactly? Can anybody explain that to me? Why we're getting these $100,000 contracts, but the big one we don't get? Pending review of solicitor. You were right, Brian. I did some research on how many times in the last 6 years it was no contract, but pending solicitor review. Wasn't a million, like Dr. Zerbe said. Wasn't dozens, like Ralph said. 9 times in 6 years. And most of them came in 18 and 19. So I'm not sure what's going on, unless they don't want the public to see the contract. Because if the contract isn't executed, we can't get it under right to know. So that could be the reason that we have solicitor review. Now, can anybody tell me whether the KCBA architect contract from August 27th is executed? It's 3 months now. You'd be executing it because you're the board president. Did you sign the KCBA architect contract? Design and document services, 1.8 million, 5.4%. Did you sign it yet?
I'm not sure why you're waiting for a response. You know we don't do that.
Well, you have the option to, don't you? There's nothing that prohibits you from giving me a response. but you're going to force me to file right-to-know requests that may be turned down because it's not signed. How about the civil engineer contract? Is that signed or executed? Can't tell me that one either? I've tried sending you emails to ask questions and you refuse to answer. I'm asking you questions now, you refuse to answer. So there's only one way to get answers, and that's right to know. And I'll save that for the next meeting because you have an absolute disaster going on here for right to know. You'll be sending me an affidavit pretty soon. So will Dr. Zerbe. So will Ralph. So you guys have some problems here. Yeah, they're going to be sending affidavits. So I'm interested to see what you guys have to say.
Anyone else for courtesy of the floor? Any closing comments from the board before we adjourn? Seeing none, I will adjourn our meeting then. Thank you, everyone.